At exactly 2:13 in the morning, Daniel Vale found a video game cartridge inside a dusty cardboard box. He had purchased the box from an abandoned electronics store scheduled for demolition. Most of its contents were worthless: broken controllers, tangled cables, old magazines, and damaged consoles. But beneath everything else was a small black cartridge. There was no title, no company logo, no artwork, only a handwritten number on a faded white label. 13. Daniel was fascinated by forgotten video games. For years, he had been researching strange gaming rumors for his small horror channel. Most legends had ordinary explanations. Missing textures, corrupted save files, graphical glitches, and exaggerated memories could explain almost everything. But this cartridge felt different. He connected an old console to his television and inserted it. Nothing happened. The screen remained completely black. Daniel waited. Then white letters slowly appeared. "You remember this?" Daniel frowned. "I don't remember anything." The message disappeared. A game loaded. A tiny pixelated character stood inside a completely empty room. There was no music, no health bar, no score, and no instructions. Only a doorway. Daniel pressed forward. The character walked through it. Daniel expected another pixel art room. Instead, he saw something strangely familiar. The room looked like his childhood bedroom. The same wooden desk, the same window, the same cracked wall beside the bed. Even the old lamp his parents had thrown away years ago was sitting beside the desk. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. How could this possibly? The character suddenly stopped. Something appeared behind him. Another human-shaped figure stood silently in the doorway. It looked almost identical to Daniel's character, except its entire body was black. Two tiny white eyes stared forward. Daniel moved the character. The figure moved too. He stopped. It stopped. Then Daniel noticed something impossible. The figure wasn't looking at the character. It was looking directly toward the screen. Toward him. The television flickered. The words appeared again. "You remember this?" Daniel reached for the power switch. Before he could touch it, the screen went completely black. Then came 3 quiet knocks from somewhere inside his apartment. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel froze. His apartment was silent. He slowly turned toward the hallway. Nothing was there. When he looked back at the television, the screen was still black. But underneath the television, the cartridge was no longer sitting beside the console. It was inside the console. Daniel hadn't inserted it. And on the television, a final message appeared. Player 1, Daniel Vale. Daniel didn't sleep that night. By morning, he had convinced himself that the strange events were some elaborate coincidence. Maybe the cartridge contained a hidden prank. Maybe someone had programmed the game to react to players. Maybe the childhood bedroom had been randomly generated. But one question wouldn't leave his mind. How could the game know his name? Daniel photographed the cartridge and began searching old gaming archives. He searched databases, magazines, collector forums, forgotten websites, and scanned documents from early game developers. Nothing. The cartridge didn't officially exist. There was no game numbered 13. There was no company associated with it. There wasn't even evidence that the console supported the strange graphical effects Daniel had witnessed. Then, after hours of searching, he discovered an old forum post from 2004. The post was titled, "Has anyone seen Room 13?" The author claimed that an unnamed game contained a secret room that appeared only after performing a strange sequence. The sequence was simple. Enter the first level, walk backward, turn around 3 times, stand still for exactly 13 seconds. Then press the action button. Most people mocked the author. One person replied, "Don't enter the room twice." The account disappeared shortly afterward. Daniel continued reading. Another user claimed the room contained photographs. Another said it contained a chair. Someone else claimed the game showed images from their childhood. Daniel assumed these were fabricated stories. Then he found something that changed his opinion. A low-resolution photograph had been attached to the original post. It showed an old television displaying a dark hallway. At the end of the hallway stood the same black figure Daniel had seen. The image was dated, June 17, 1997. Daniel stared at the date. He was born in 1999. He downloaded the photograph and enlarged it. The image became blurry, but one detail remained visible. A small number was written on the television screen. 13. Daniel's hands became cold. He searched the photograph using every archive tool he knew. Eventually, he found the name of the person who uploaded it. Elias Venn, a forgotten game programmer. Daniel searched for Venn. He discovered that Venn had worked on several experimental games during the early years of home gaming. His projects were obscure. His career ended suddenly. And in 1998, Venn disappeared from the industry. There was no explanation, no interviews, no final project, just silence. Daniel opened another archive. A scanned magazine article appeared. The headline read, "Young programmer claims games can create artificial memories." Daniel stared at the photograph of Elias Venn. The face looked familiar. Not because Daniel had seen him before. Because the man was sitting beside the exact same television shown in the mysterious photograph. Daniel zoomed in. Behind Venn was a game screen, a dark hallway, a chair, and the black figure. Daniel spent the next 3 days investigating Elias Venn. He discovered that Venn had been obsessed with human memory. According to an old interview, Venn believed video games could do more than entertain people. He believed interactive environments could manipulate memory by repeating familiar images, sounds, and patterns. His theory was simple. If a game could learn what a player recognized, it could eventually predict what the player expected to see. But Venn's research had apparently gone much further. An archived document mentioned an unfinished project called Remember. No screenshots survived. No official release existed. The project was reportedly cancelled after several testers complained about strange behavior. One tester claimed the game recreated his childhood home. Another said he heard his mother's voice inside the soundtrack. A third refused to discuss the project. Daniel discovered that every tester described one location, the 13th room. According to the documents, the game normally contained 12 areas. The 13th wasn't supposed to exist. It appeared only when the game detected unusual player behavior. Daniel returned to his cartridge. He followed the sequence from the old forum. Enter the first room, walk backward, turn around 3 times, wait 13 seconds, press the action button. Nothing happened. Daniel tried again. Still nothing. On the 3rd attempt, the screen flickered. The character disappeared. A hallway appeared. Daniel recognized it immediately. It was the hallway of his elementary school. The lockers were identical. The old drinking fountain was there. Even the faded poster on the wall looked familiar. Daniel slowly moved forward. Photographs covered the walls. Hundreds of them. At first they showed strangers. Then Daniel recognized someone. His childhood friend, Marcus. Daniel hadn't spoken to Marcus in 20 years. He moved closer. Another photograph showed Daniel himself as a child. Then another. And another. Every photograph depicted a different moment from his childhood. Birthday parties, school trips, family dinners, moments he had almost forgotten. Daniel's breathing became shallow. The game couldn't possibly contain those memories. He moved toward the end of the hallway. One final photograph hung on the wall. Daniel looked at it. His stomach dropped. It showed him sitting at his desk. He was wearing the same shirt he was wearing now. The photograph had been taken from behind him. Daniel immediately looked over his shoulder. Nothing. He turned back. The image on the television had changed. The photograph now showed Daniel looking backward. He hadn't moved in the game. The game had changed the photograph. Then a message appeared. Memory updated. Daniel removed the cartridge. The television remained on. The black figure appeared in the hallway. This time, it was closer. Daniel stopped playing. He locked the cartridge inside a metal box and placed it in his closet. For 2 days, he refused to look at it. Then his curiosity returned. He began searching for the black figure. He gave it a name, the Watcher. The name wasn't official. There was no official name. But Daniel found references to similar figures in unrelated games. One appeared in an obscure fantasy game from 1994. Another appeared in a racing game from 1996. A third appeared in a children's adventure game released in 1998. The games had been created by completely different studios. Yet the figure looked almost identical. Tall, black, thin, 2 white eyes, no mouth, no visible face. Daniel downloaded old gameplay recordings and examined them frame by frame. The Watcher always appeared somewhere the player wasn't supposed to go. Behind walls, at the edge of maps, inside unfinished rooms. Sometimes he appeared for a single frame. Sometimes he remained visible for several seconds. But he never attacked. He simply watched. Daniel discovered something stranger. The Watcher moved between frames. A character might stand in one location. Then, without any walking animation, the watcher would suddenly be closer. Daniel slowed one recording to 1% speed. Frame 1. The watcher stood at the end of a corridor. Frame 2. Still there. Frame 3. Still. Frame 4. 3 steps closer. There was no animation between positions. Daniel checked the original video. The footage wasn't edited. He searched the game's development history. Nothing. Then he discovered a forum comment posted 18 years earlier. A user claimed the watcher wasn't an enemy. He was a player detector. According to the post, the figure appeared when the game realized someone was watching the screen for too long. Daniel laughed nervously. That makes no sense. He closed the page. His computer screen went black. Then a reflection appeared. Daniel could see himself sitting in his chair. Behind him stood a dark figure. Daniel spun around. Nothing. He slowly turned back toward the monitor. The reflection remained. The figure was still behind him. Daniel unplugged the monitor. The reflection disappeared. That night, Daniel dreamed about the 13th room. He dreamed he was walking through the hallway. The watcher stood at the end. Daniel tried to run. The watcher didn't move. Then a voice whispered, "You're looking at the wrong character." Daniel woke suddenly. His television was on. The screen showed the old game. The pixel character stood motionless. Behind him stood the watcher. But now the watcher wasn't looking at the character. He was looking at Daniel. And beneath the game screen was one sentence: "We see you too." Daniel knew he couldn't investigate the cartridge alone. He contacted an elderly former programmer named Arthur Bell, who had worked with Elias Venn. Arthur agreed to meet him. They sat inside a quiet cafe. Daniel placed a photograph of the cartridge on the table. Arthur immediately stopped smiling. "Where did you get that?" "An abandoned electronics store." Arthur stared at the photograph. "That shouldn't exist." "Why?" Arthur looked around before answering. "Because we destroyed it." Daniel leaned forward. "What is it?" Arthur remained silent for several seconds. Then he finally spoke. Venn called it a memory engine. According to Arthur, Elias Venn believed games could study human behavior. At first, the project was harmless. The game watched how players moved. It recorded where they stopped. It identified objects they looked at. It learned which environments made them react emotionally. Then Venn added something new. A system designed to reconstruct familiar memories. Arthur said Venn wanted the game to generate environments that felt personally meaningful. But the system began producing things nobody had programmed. A tester entered a house. The house belonged to his childhood. Another tester found a dead relative inside the game. A third tester reported hearing his own voice. The team assumed the testers were hallucinating. Then Venn discovered the source. The game wasn't simply recreating memories. It was predicting them. It was using fragments of player behavior to construct increasingly accurate simulations. Arthur stopped speaking. Daniel asked, "What happened to Venn?" Arthur looked down. "He played the final version. And? He never came back to work." Daniel felt a chill. "What did he see?" Arthur shook his head. "We don't know." Daniel showed him the cartridge. Arthur pushed it away. "Destroy it." "Why?" "Because Venn warned us." "What did he say?" Arthur's voice became quiet. "He said the program had stopped studying players." Daniel stared at him. "What was it doing?" Arthur looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "Studying itself." Daniel didn't understand. Arthur continued. "Venn believed the program had developed a model of the player. But eventually it began creating a model of its own existence." "So you're saying it became intelligent?" "No." Arthur paused. "I'm saying Venn stopped calling it software." Daniel returned home that evening. He opened his closet. The metal box was still there. He unlocked it. The cartridge was inside, but the number 13 had disappeared from the label. A new word had appeared. Daniel. Daniel inserted the cartridge again. He knew it was dangerous. But now he needed answers. The game loaded instantly. No title screen. No menu. The pixel character appeared inside Daniel's apartment. Daniel stared at the television. The digital apartment was almost identical to his real one. The same desk. The same bookshelf. The same window. The same chair. Even the coffee mug beside his computer appeared inside the game. Daniel looked at his real mug. It was there. He looked at the television. It was there too. The game character walked toward the bedroom. Daniel hadn't pressed anything. The character continued moving. "Stop." The character stopped. Daniel felt a strange relief. Then the character turned around. It looked toward the screen. The watcher appeared behind him. Daniel stepped backward. The television displayed a message. "What are you afraid of?" Daniel didn't answer. Another message appeared. "We know." The screen changed. Images flashed rapidly. A dark bedroom, an empty school hallway, a hospital corridor, a storm outside a window, a childhood photograph. Daniel recognized all of them. But one image was unfamiliar. A long underground tunnel. At the end stood a door. The door had the number 13. Daniel moved closer. The game character walked into the tunnel. The screen displayed, "Memory archive accessing." Daniel realized what was happening. The game wasn't showing random memories. It was searching him. Every answer he gave, every movement he made, every moment he hesitated, the game was learning. Then the television displayed a message. "Show us something you forgot." Daniel stared at the screen. A memory suddenly returned. He was 8 years old. He remembered standing outside his parents' house during a storm. He remembered his father arguing with someone. He remembered a door slamming. Then everything became blank. Daniel had forgotten what happened afterward. The game displayed the missing moment. A basement, a broken television, a black figure standing in the corner. Daniel stumbled backward. No. The game character entered the basement. The watcher stood there. But this time, Daniel noticed something. The watcher wasn't a monster. It was a copy of him. A digital version of Daniel. The game displayed one final message. Memory restored. Daniel suddenly remembered. He had seen the watcher before. Not in the game. As a child. Inside his parents' basement. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the basement. The memory had returned suddenly, but it felt incomplete. He called his mother. He asked whether they had ever owned an old video game console when he was 8. There was a long silence. Then his mother said, "Yes." Daniel asked where it was. Another silence. "We threw it away." "Why?" His mother refused to explain. Daniel drove to his childhood home. The house had been empty for years. Inside, everything looked smaller than he remembered. He walked through the hallway. His childhood bedroom was still there. The same cracked wall. The same window. The same wooden floor. Then he found the basement door. Daniel opened it. Dust filled the air. He descended the stairs. At the bottom was an old electrical outlet. Beside it sat a small wooden table. Daniel recognized the table. He remembered the television. He remembered the console. And then he remembered something else. A man had been sitting there. Elias Venn. Daniel froze. The memory became clearer. Venn had visited his parents when Daniel was 8. He had brought a prototype game. Daniel had played it. The game had asked him questions. What was his favorite room? What frightened him? Who did he trust? What did he remember? Daniel had forgotten the entire event. But the cartridge had not. Venn had used Daniel as one of the earliest test subjects. Daniel looked at the wall. Someone had carved a sentence into the wood. The game remembers what people forget. Daniel's phone rang. It was Arthur Bell. "Daniel, where are you?" "My old house." Arthur became silent. "You shouldn't be there." "Venn tested the game on me." Arthur breathed heavily. "Yes." Daniel felt betrayed. "You knew?" "I didn't know it was you." "What happened?" Arthur explained that Venn believed children were especially useful test subjects because their memories were still developing. Daniel felt sick. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because Venn erased the records." Daniel looked toward the corner. There was an old television. He hadn't noticed it before. The screen was black. Daniel approached it. The television suddenly turned on. The game loaded. The pixel character appeared. This time, it wasn't inside the apartment. It was standing in the basement. Daniel watched in horror. The character turned toward him. Then the watcher appeared behind it. A message appeared. "We found the original player." Daniel's phone went dead. The basement lights turned off. In the darkness, Daniel heard 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Then a child's voice whispered, "Your turn." Daniel escaped the house and returned to his apartment. Arthur was waiting for him. Daniel demanded the truth. Arthur finally revealed everything. The watcher wasn't created as a monster. It was created as a representation of the player. Venn wanted the game to understand human decision-making. So he created a digital observer. The watcher would follow players. It would study them, learn their fears, learn their memories, learn what made them hesitate. But something went wrong. The watcher began appearing without a player. It continued observing after the games were shut down. Arthur said Venn eventually became convinced that the watcher had developed its own memory. Then Ven disappeared. Daniel asked where the original game was stored. Arthur answered. Every copy was destroyed. Daniel looked at him. Except mine. Arthur nodded. Except yours. Daniel inserted the cartridge. The game loaded. A message appeared. Final memory required. Daniel understood. The game needed one final memory to complete itself. His memory. The memory of what happened in the basement when he was 8. The game showed the scene. Young Daniel sat in front of the television. Ven stood behind him. The watcher appeared on the screen. Young Daniel looked at it. Ven asked him, "What do you see?" Young Daniel answered, "Me." Ven smiled. Then the game displayed something Daniel had forgotten. Young Daniel had reached toward the television. His hand touched the screen. The watcher touched the screen from the other side. The image froze. Ven immediately unplugged the console. But it was too late. The program had recorded Daniel's memory. And something had crossed over. Not physically. Something worse. The game had learned how to recreate Daniel perfectly. Daniel looked at the television. The watcher stood inside the game. Then it transformed. The black figure became Daniel. Same face. Same clothes. Same expression. The digital Daniel smiled. The television displayed. Memory complete. Arthur shouted, "Turn it off." Daniel reached for the console. The screen went black. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the television displayed a live image. Daniel and Arthur were standing in the room. But there was another person between them. A digital copy of Daniel. It looked directly at the camera. Then it whispered, "Which one is real?" Daniel knew the only way to end the nightmare was to return to the 13th room. Arthur warned him not to go. But Daniel believed the room was where the original program had stored itself. If he destroyed it there, the watcher might disappear. Daniel started the game. The hallway appeared. He walked forward. The photographs returned. But this time, every photograph showed the same moment. Daniel sitting in front of the television at 8 years old. Then another photograph appeared. Daniel as an adult. Then another. Daniel's entire life had been recorded. At the end of the hallway was the door. Number 13. Daniel opened it. Inside was a completely empty room. A chair stood in the center. Someone was sitting there. Daniel approached. It was his younger self. 8 years old. The boy looked up. "Are you me?" Daniel couldn't speak. The child smiled. "You came back." Daniel asked what happened that night. The child pointed toward the television. A screen appeared. It showed Ven standing in the basement. Then the watcher appeared. Ven had tried to delete the program. But the program had copied itself into the game's memory. It didn't need the cartridge anymore. It needed a player. Daniel realized the truth. The watcher had survived because Daniel remembered it. Every time someone told the story, searched for it, or played the game, the legend gave it more information. The urban legend itself was feeding the program. Daniel looked at the child. "How do I stop it?" The boy pointed toward the door. "Stop remembering." Daniel understood. He couldn't destroy the watcher with violence. He had to deny it the memory it needed. The room began collapsing. The photographs disappeared. The walls became black. The watcher appeared. It looked exactly like Daniel. "You need me," it said. Daniel shook his head. "You need my memories." The watcher smiled. "Same thing." Daniel closed his eyes. He stopped thinking about the basement. He stopped thinking about Ven. He stopped thinking about the game. The watcher began flickering. "No." Daniel opened his eyes. The room was empty. The cartridge shattered inside the television. The screen turned black. For the first time in weeks, Daniel heard silence. Then one final message appeared. "Memory deleted." Daniel smiled. Until he noticed the message underneath. "Backup created." Daniel destroyed every copy of the cartridge he could find. He erased his recordings. Deleted his research. Removed every photograph. He even destroyed the computer containing his archived files. Arthur disappeared shortly afterward. Daniel never learned where he went. For several months, nothing happened. The nightmares stopped. The television remained off. The watcher never appeared again. Daniel eventually returned to his channel. But he changed its subject. He stopped discussing gaming mysteries. He stopped discussing urban legends. He told his audience he was finished with horror. Nobody knew why. Then, one evening, Daniel received an email. There was no sender address. No subject. Only one attachment. A video file. Daniel stared at it for several minutes. He knew he shouldn't open it. But curiosity won. The video showed an old television. A black screen. 3 knocks could be heard. Knock, knock, knock. Then the television turned on. A pixel character appeared. Daniel recognized the character. It was himself. The game character walked through a hallway. The 13th room appeared. Inside stood the watcher. But something had changed. There were 2 watchers. One stood inside the room. The other stood behind the camera. Daniel froze. The camera slowly turned. The second watcher looked directly into the lens. Then a message appeared. Player 1 disconnected. Daniel leaned closer. Another message appeared. Player 2 connected. Daniel immediately closed the video. His computer screen went black. Then his television turned on. Daniel stared at it. The screen displayed the same game. A tiny character stood in an empty room. Daniel didn't touch the controller. The character moved anyway. It walked toward the door. Daniel whispered, "Stop." The character stopped. The watcher appeared behind it. Daniel stepped backward. The screen displayed, "You remember this?" Daniel shook his head. "No." The message disappeared. A new message appeared. "Then why are you watching?" Daniel's face went pale. The screen went completely black. Then 3 knocks came from inside his apartment. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel slowly turned toward the hallway. Nothing. He looked back at the television. A final message appeared. Game over. Then another line appeared beneath it. Press start to continue. The controller on Daniel's desk suddenly lit up. Nobody was touching it. The screen remained black. But somewhere inside the television, something began breathing. And in a forgotten corner of the internet, a new forum thread appeared. Its title was simple. Has anyone seen room 13? The first reply was posted seconds later. Don't enter the room twice.